let us discuss about chapter 3, which is economic reforms since 1991. So when we go to the topic, the first thing we have to understand, that is, what is economic reform. The change in set of economic policies since 1991 is called economic reforms, or in short we can say NEP, which means new economic policy. Now what is the meaning of change in a set of economic policies? We know only earlier, means when we see before independence, when we think about our country was with full of natural resources as well as good mineral resources we had. But after once the British people started working in our country and they started their full control on our country, what happens, our natural resources has started vanishing. So, and what happened after the independence, after 1947, India was adopting a centrally planned economy. Centrally planned economy in the sense that the government was taking care only of the welfare of the people. So there was no improvement in any of the economic activities, only the welfare of the people were taken care. And there were many restrictions on export and import. Foreign trade was not going on well, and our country was going in a very bad debt conditions. We had to always depend upon other countries, otherwise we have to depend upon other banks, world banks, for meeting our financial requirements. So for making changes in the economy, we were supposed to change the entire economic policies. Now let us see what is the reason for the change in economic policy, why it has been done that India has to change its economic policies. Now let us go to the background. What is the story behind economic reform since 1991 is, the main thing, financial crisis of 1980, where revenue became less than expenditure. So that means what? We were spending so much money for the welfare as well as for different projects, development project, etc. Our revenue was very less compared to the expenditure. Borrowings from public banks and international financial institutions. So for fulfilling our expenditure, when our revenue was less, we had to keep on borrowing from public banks, and when our country banks, what condition was very poor, we have to go to the international organizations to borrow the money, or borrow the what all amount we are in need. Expenditure on unemployment, poverty and population explosion. So where we were spending more money, many of our people were unemployed, means without a job they were suffering. So the government has to help them by giving certain amount. And not only that, poverty was also a main issue there, and not only that, population explosion. India's population was increasing in a very high speed. So these were the reasons our expenditures were increasing more than the revenue. So because to overcome all this situation, India had to approach finally the World Bank and IMF, International Monetary Organizations. So we had to borrow huge amount from them, then only we could fulfill our expenditure we made. So the international organizations, World Bank and IMF, they were ready to make the payment. But one thing they have asked from India, that India has to change the entire economic policies. So World Bank and IMF was given $7 billion to India, and in return, India's at the time of 1991, India's Prime Minister was Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao, and at the time Finance Minister was Dr. Manmohan Singh. These both were agreed to World Bank and IMF that India is going to change the economic policies. So the new economic policies can be divided into stabilization and structural adjustment programs. So what all changes in the economy made because of the advice of World Bank and IMF, this all been classified into two headings. One is the stabilization programs and the other one is the structural adjustment programs. Now, what do you mean by the stabilization programs? The name itself. The stabilization programs are those which bring stability in the economy. Stabilization, making stability in the economy. So, these are also known as macroeconomic measures that affect the whole economy. So, this will be affecting the entire economy. Then only we can be kept a stability in the economy. So, what all work these stabilization programs do? They correct BOP and control inflation. What is BOP now? Balance of payment situation, and control inflation. Inflation means whenever the prices increases, value of money decreases. It is a dangerous situation for the economy. So, with the help of stabilization program, the inflation pressure was controlled. Along with that, BOP, balance of payment, also has been corrected. Next is the short term measures. Along with that, many short term measures were also taken to reduce or to make stability in the economy. Next is the financial sector reforms. Financial sector reforms includes the banking sector reforms. What are the changes made in the banking sector on the intervention of RBI in the entire banking system? That is known as financial sector reforms. Finally, fiscal sector reforms. Fiscal sector is related to the government sector. That means the government revenue and government expenditure, what are the reforms have been made, which all the areas the government have to spend money, where the revenue has been collected, what is the tax system. So, these all where comes under the fiscal sector reform. So, altogether this is known as the stabilization programs.